Joining us for another installation of the free AWP webinar series. This one is another presented by the AWP Conference. Today's webinar is on changing the culture. First of all, before we get into the content of today's presentation, just want to make sure everyone is aware in Houston, Texas, the AWP Conference is happening this October. That's October 2nd and 3rd down at the JW Marriott Houston Galleria location. We also have plans for 2 AWP conferences in 2019, both of them in springtime. Edmonton, Alberta will be coming back to Alberta for the first time since 2013, and then London, England in May, I believe May 14th and 15th of 2019. So check awpconference.com for information about that. Thank you as well to the AWP Conference Advisory Board. This is the team of owners and members of the EEP and C community that have come together to volunteer their time to help us develop the program, the themes, the formats, the networking events, and all the great things around the AWP Conference. Starting in 2017, we've been working with this board, and in 2018, we've done some great work so far, so thanks to that group. And the panelists today are also members of that team. The conference theme for 2018 is Developing an AWP Organization. What's your AWP playbook? The topics on the main stage are designed to kind of dive in deeper to topics related to that theme. AWP scalability, cultural change, which we're talking a little bit about today, AWP technologies, procurement for AWP, measuring AWP success, and creating your own playbook. Full details about the conference programming is at awpconference.com right now as well. So I'm going to hand this over to Keith, who is our facilitator. Keith, welcome to the webinar.
How's everybody doing today? I guess on behalf of me and the rest of the panel, I want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. We're going to discuss the topic of changing the culture, and we're going to hear from the industry experts around this topic. We're also going to go through a presentation, and we kind of tailored the presentations to more of an industry perspective versus any particular company's perspective. So I guess without wasting any more time, I'll call out the panelist, and the panelist will just tell the group maybe what your role is within the company, and we'll go from there. So Jamie Gerberk.
Construction Global Technology Sponsor with ExxonMobil.
Donald.
I'm a construction manager with DTE Energy. We're the electric and gas utility for southeastern Michigan, based out of the beautiful city of Detroit.
Fernando.
Yeah, hi. Fernando España, president of Constructex. We support the implementation of advanced work packaging.
And a slight misspelling on Fernando's name there. Sorry about that, Fernando.
Yeah, it's okay.
And Keith Letzos, I'm a construction manager and AWP manager with WorleyParsons. I'll be the facilitator and part of the panel as well today. So I guess the topics for today are why the culture needs to change for AWP delivery, how do you determine what you need to change, what organizational components affect a change, and then we're going to kind of open it up for some questions and some audience engagement, and then we're going to finish the afternoon or the morning with how we sustain the change. So going to the next slide. So what is a culture? Corporate culture refers to the shared values, attitudes, standards, and beliefs that characterize members of an organization and define its nature. Corporate culture is rooted in an organization's goals, strategies, structures, approaches to labor, customers, project delivery, and overall the community. As such, it's an essential component to any business's or project's ultimate success or failure. So that's a definition that I found on the internet when I was looking up corporate culture to define the term. It affects the productivity and performance and provides guidance on customer care service, product quality, safety, attendance, punctuality, concern for the operating environment. Generally, until a clear need for change is introduced, the culture wants to stay the same. But we can make a change, and we need to make a change. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists to discuss the why, the what, and the how the industry culture needs to change to support the advanced work packaging. So Don, you have our first question here, or our first topic. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. So how do we determine what change, assessment, readiness, and effectiveness? Here at DTE, we looked at the whys of why AWP is needed in our organization. And we look at issues like, has there been performance variability in execution of projects? Do our construction crew productivity has not been optimized? Construction crews' lack of installation support information. Installation information is not readily available to the crews at the point of activity. And then finally, we looked at there's no standard pre-specified methodology for communicating information to the actual boots on the ground crews that are in the field doing the work. Next, we look at understanding the key attributes of a standard work package. One of the benchmarking efforts that was done, we worked closely with AWP and CII, and what we've located is actually 12 attributes. First is a step-by-step work instruction, safety precautions and pre-job brief requirements, the need for specialty tools, crew resources, special expertise and requirements, quality checks, span of work, predecessor and successor work packages are identified, staged parts, materials list, support documents, drawings, scaffolding, accessibility requirements, lessons learned, and finally crew feedback. So what we also saw is that work packages should be developed as early as possible during a project. Engineering and installation planning should be integrated, and work packaging requirements should be specified in the contracts up front using the standardized wording. And that's really key, and it kind of goes into our next point, is understanding the change culture of the organization and contractors. We need to understand that there's no quick fixes to this. A lot of owners and contractors, we've been doing things certain ways for so long, and we understand that, and we understand we have to change and adapt to improve safety, productivity, and quality. Organizational leaders must have a clear and realistic view of the culture. And for owners to affect change, it's important to collectively explore and define expectations with the contractors. So it's really a collaboration and a planning effort that has to go hand in hand, working with owners and contractors together. Understanding that you're able to create that partnership with the contractor to effectively implement AWP. Again, we have to work together to make it profitable both for the owner and contractor. And finally, we talk about monitor and measure your effectiveness in utilizing AWP. Now, we found that this can be a difficult thing to do, especially when we're new to it. But CII has developed a AWP maturity stage and maturity model, and they've identified 3 levels. First is the level 1, which is your early stages. You're just starting out. You're learning how work packages affect and impact the business. Level 2 is an AWP effectiveness. We're kind of effective. We're doing good. We're really starting to make good strides. And then finally, level 3 really shows business transformation and how you've proven that you can do the projects better, faster, cheaper. And one of the models show that, when the early stages, you're saving about 10% improvement in productivity. And as you grow through the maturity stage to level 2, you're seeing around 25% improvement. And that transitions over to the level 3, which again, that 25% improvement is there. But you're also seeing a 10% reduction in costs as well. And with that, your safety is still maintained, and you're seeing very low recordable rates or lost time injuries. So that's what I have for changing the culture.
Appreciate it, Don. Jamie, we're going to turn it over to you.
So why the culture needs to change for AWP delivery? And number one, through research activities involving COAA and CII, our industry brought about AWP as a clear need to change was being introduced around improving execution efficiency, along with safety and other performance dimensions. And number two, AWP provides a methodology for each project management discipline, including execution planning, scheduling, engineering, procurement, construction, etc., and all project team members to leverage in improving project performance. So AWP touches many elements of an organization. Number three, AWP directly relates to approaches to labor, customers, and project delivery. These points that I'm relating to come right from the definition that Keith described earlier, the definition of culture. So when you look at labor, how we demonstrate care by putting in the effort to better dissect our projects into manageable chunks and then manage the constraints in advance. Think about the care for the workforce that demonstrates. For customers in project delivery, AWP helps bring about improvements in transparency and in predictability. So all of this with AWP relates directly to these approaches to labor, customers, and project delivery. Number four, effective AWP implementation, of course, is not easy. It requires some hard work and dedication in order to mature along those stages that Don just described. And that's the last point on the definition that indicates that culture wants to stay the same. So this effort, this work effort to implement AWP needs to be anticipated. Number five, alignment of shared values, attitudes, and beliefs, particularly about AWP, are key to moving forward and should be addressed. This shared values, attitudes, and beliefs, again, comes right from that definition of culture. And then number six, also from the culture definition, goals, strategies, structure, and approaches, those may need adjustment to better align with AWP. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right, yeah, thank you, Jamie. This is Fernando. So what I'm going to focus on is the organizational components that really affect the change. And I've listed the top 10, in somewhat of a order of importance. But first, gaining leadership awareness and alignment, including proactively supporting AWP is critical, right? Because leadership are the ones that people look up to, and they're the ones that set up steering committees and task force teams. So it's critical that leadership gets on board and supports. Next one is identifying the targeted benefits and investment requirements, right? We need to know what you're shooting for. Everybody needs to be transparent about that. And there are investments to make, right? We all tend to look at costs, and if people look at costs on the projects or costs on this, it's a negative. But if we understand the investment and the benefits we're trying to achieve, it all starts making sense. The next one, having an AWP strategic plan and deployment roadmap, right, with enabling technologies. When you get together and start putting any kind of plan, like a project, right, what do we really need to do? What do we need to achieve, and how are we going to achieve it? And it's a several year, what we call horizon strategy. Next. Also, bringing people together, building coalitions to drive change, leveraging dedicated positions. The organizations start reshaping. Dedicated people come on board, champions are identified, and they become the voice of AWP to drive the culture change. Next, creating adaptable corporate and project AWP processes and artifacts. And by artifacts, I mean guidelines, playbooks, procedures, and those types of things that people need to look to understand what their required actions and deliverables are. So critical to have those in place, and they need to be adaptable, right? Because every corporation is different, every region is different. Projects, need some tweaking here and there because we want to make it fit for purpose. Next, aligning functional groups and breaking silos. Very, very important here, right? We always talk about we want engineering to align with procurement, align with construction, align with our supply chain, right? But we don't behave that way. So a proactive approach to really driving those interactions and breaking those silos is a key part of that. And this is a big focus along the maturity curve. Aligning contracts and the supply chain to enable optimized solutions, right? Work gets done when money changes hands, and that, contracts and behaviors, terms and conditions really have to align with advanced work packaging and the supply chain, how we qualify them, knowing that not everybody understands advanced work packaging and may only say, well, the owner wants us to do that, but gee, since they're paying the bill, we better learn this fast, right? So we need to make sure our contracts and are aligned to advanced work packaging as well. And I'm just not also engineering, not just construction. Establishing multi-tiered education and training programs, right? This is a long-term investment, and more people are introduced into the programs, right? Our supply chain needs to be updated as to how we as an owner or an EPC are going to engage them in the advanced work packaging program. So it's critical that we think through this. How do we raise levels of awareness across our supply chain? How do we actually go from introductory training program to more advanced simulation type events, right? So we need to think through and develop a program. Number 9, knowing what motivates people, rewarding efforts and learning from failures, right? Because there's so much pressure in our industry as part of our culture. I paid you to go do this, and don't ask me any questions because that somehow makes you look like you don't know what you're doing. Well, advanced work packaging is all about collaboration. It's all about, hey, we all want to do better, but we need to understand what motivates people, what they're looking for as incentives, reward those efforts, and like Jamie and Don said, there's this maturity, and we're going to have failures along the way. We have to recognize that, and that's part of our investment is let's learn from our failures. Let's drive what I'm going to have on the next step. Actually, my last one is establishing a robust continuous improvement program with oversight and support, right? We have to have that because we need to know where we're heading in the long run and how we improve and get ourselves accelerate up that maturity curve. So a continuous improvement program is absolutely critical, and one that actually spins around in a closed loop, right? We identify a problem and we actually respond to it, react to it, and we get people involved in how do we improve. So those are the top 10.
Great.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. So we're going to take a few minutes now to go to Q&A. We have about 10 minutes left in the webinar, and we want to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. But first, we're just going to start with a brief discussion among the panelists to get their perspectives individually on high-level, basically to get their perspective on changing the culture. So we're going to start with Fernando. Actually, we'll keep going, Fernando. Question 1 here is, how does AWP itself help with changing the culture?
And this is the exciting part, just because of the nature of advanced work packaging. When you have leadership involved and you have other people that really see the benefit, and they start proactively engaging, at all levels. They get involved. And so primarily, again, leadership is critical because everybody's looking up to them. So when you see your leaders and see people that you respect start embracing advanced work packaging, you start to accept it, right? And people that are in resistance, they need to be supported and brought through the process. Another critical thing about this is advanced work packaging really introduces this structure, right? And there's an unstructured part to it, but it really introduces this structure which drives these behavior changes. You know, we have to interact this way. We have people and procedures are all of a sudden interfacing with us, and just by the very nature of that structure and how we build packages, how we ready packages, and such, I mean, really help people, guide people in driving towards this advanced work packaging, right? And I'll make a statement about the unstructured side, which is more the interactive part of it, right? We know that by interactive planning, interactive project planning, the very nature of it increases this level of collaboration and conversation around these things. People start recognizing, wow, maybe I can see a better way, and we start chipping away at that behavior. But it's just the nature of this advanced work packaging program that really enables all sorts of focus areas to drive culture change. I mean, hopefully that answered the question.
Excellent, thank you so much. For Jamie, how does the owner culture need to change to support advanced work?
So, because AWP connects to so many disciplines and individuals on project teams, number one, I'd say a wide span of fit for group, fit for roles, types of education and training are key to obtaining full organization commitment. So number one, education and training will be key to what an owner can do to bring about the culture of change. The second point, owners have an opportunity to bring improved clarity on expectations. And as Fernando just shared, AWP provides an excellent framework, a context, and a structure for understanding project management, performance, and delivery expectations better.
Okay, great. So finally, last but not least, I should say, Keith, how does a contractor culture need to change to support advanced work packaging?
So I think we hear a lot of statements like, this is the way we've always done it, or this is outside of our normal work practice. And I think the answer to these statements is we know, but in general, industry is calling for a change. They've seen the need for a change, whether it's to improve safety, project predictability, and efficiency. And I think AWP is the way to do this. And it is outside of the normal work practice of the way that we've always done it. We need, I think, the first step to how to change is to realize that this is going to be a little bit different. And like we said, time and time again, we need to appoint somebody in upper management, or somebody in upper management really needs to take the ball to implement this across the contractor's culture. And they need to believe in AWP, not just say, hey, we're going to do it and just expect it to work itself out. They need to appoint the right project director to a project that believes in the benefits and that understands that he needs to support some of these changes that are going to be made, knowing that things are going to be done a little bit different than the normal or past projects that they've done. And I think generally overall, projects have kind of gravitated to being engineering and procurement driven, and the contractor culture has moved with that industry change. As a construction manager, our input's usually after the fact. The path of engineering and the path of construction is set, and we get to the field and end up kind of having to look for work. What's here? What can we work on? And that's what we do. Instead, we need to develop a path of construction early and get engineering and procurement to support the path of construction. The most of your money is saved in the efficiency in the field, so we need to drive to that. And then, engineering's focused on drip feeding drawings, and procurement is bulk POs and trying to get the best bang for your buck. And I feel like in procurement, we're kind of stepping over dollars to pick up some pennies, where the procurement, if you can congregate procurement work packages and deliver on the needs of the early deliveries and what materials are needed to support your early construction, it may cost you a little bit more in the front end, but you're going to save it immensely, not having to come back and fish the equipment in with, whether it be a bigger crane or more man hours. You'll save it in the back end. And for engineering, we're always focused on ISO curves and what the production looks like per drawing, and we need to focus on the right deliverables. Are we getting the right EWP packages out on time? And we need to focus more on the package delivery and less on what the ISO curve looks like. It doesn't do us any good if we put out a bunch of ISOs that we're not going to install until the end of the project. I think also a lot of the project cultures are siloed, and we need to work on breaking down the silos. We need to do a better job of maybe communicating between the different groups and disciplines, and set up the project goals and have everybody work towards a project goal versus their individual discipline goals. And then I guess for construction, we need to focus on going to the field at the right time. I think this is one of the hardest changes to make. It's hard to sell to both the owner and upper management in the contractor's culture. But, you know, as they say in advanced work packaging, just because you start later doesn't mean you're really going to finish later. So as you're doing your path of construction planning, you need to set up the parameters for mobilization early and stick to it. What work packages and material you'll need to have on hand before you mobilize, and you need to mobilize when you're ready. You don't need to go out there looking for what you can do. You need to go out there with a plan and work the plan. If you start out with looking for work and what can we do to work, then you're never going to get off that trajectory, and your productivity is going to suffer.
Okay, that's obviously this is a very deep topic with a lot of layers, and this is true of all of the topics that are going to be on both the main stage and the breakout tracks for this year's conference. But we do want to give an opportunity for the audience to ask some questions here today of our panelists. We do encourage you to, of course, register for the AWP conference at awpconference.com. And if you join us in Houston this October, you'll have a chance over 2 days to talk with our panelists in much more detail about these topics and hear in much more detail what they have to say about changing the culture on the main stage. So let's pass it back to Keith now.
So the last topic we'll kind of discuss is sustaining the culture and what we need to do to sustain the change, and just put some topics here. Go to the next slide, Stephen, if you will, please.
For sure, yeah. And while Keith is closing on this topic, I'd like to encourage the attendees to send in some questions using the Q&A or the chat panel, or the raise hand feature. And before we leave here, we'll have a chance to get those questions to the panelists. So go ahead, Keith.
Okay, so the first way to sustain a change, and this is just, you know, kind of a brain dump of how we do it. You know, we have to realize that nothing happens overnight, so you have to build on the successes and go from there. So you need a champion or a group of champions in your organization that can kind of gather the goals and point the projects in the right direction. If a project hasn't done this before, people on the project haven't done this before, it's kind of going out blind. So you need somebody that can steer them in the right direction. And then once you execute one project, 2 projects, you need to retain the key personnel who've already endured and embraced the change, that have seen what works, what doesn't work, and knows the difficulties and stumbling blocks, and put them across the new projects to help steward those projects through the change as well. I think you also need to build a training program to train people within the organization. You need to have them attend conferences. There's a plug for the AWP conferences, CII, the webinars, and more formal training around AWP in general and the tools that support it. We need to keep track of our lessons learned, keep track of what worked and what worked well, and repeat those. And then we need to develop a corporate AWP procedure plans or guidelines that we can follow, that the different projects can follow, that they know they have to live within the goalposts, and keep these documents up to date with what has worked and what hasn't. And then I think the most important thing in the early implementation of advanced work packaging is, in order to keep the momentum going, is data gathering. We need to benchmark and measure the success of the projects that have implemented AWP. It's easy to hear CII or the statistics, but until your organization actually realizes the benefit on their own projects, it's a hard sell in the organization. And I think if you benchmark it and you measure the productivity, measure the success, measure the dollars that you saved, measure the schedule that you saved, and you quantify the results and spread the word around, what the success looked like and how to win, that's how you sustain the change. And you just build on that project after project until you're at stage 3.
That's great. Thank you so much, Keith, and to Fernando, Jamie, and Donald as well for sharing their expertise and their perspectives. Again, this was a very quick look at changing the culture. We didn't expect this to capture all of the nuances and details of that topic, but again, join us at the conference this year, and we'll get into much more detail. We've reached full time. However, for the attendees still online, I'd like to give you a chance to ask some questions. So I see a couple of questions have rolled in the chat. First one from Jessica: how important are connected systems/technologies to ensure clear communication across procurement, workplace planning, and construction? Maybe we'll start with Fernando for this one.
Yeah, that is a good question, and I noted it that we need to have enabling technologies, and I'm a firm believer, in people first. Let's get the process in place. Let's get everything so we can understand what these data exchanges, what technologies we need to have. And because information does need to flow, and AWP affords us all with some really rich data that we can drive improvements on. We can really get people out in the field what they need when they need it. Engineering, prioritize, and align, but we really need to have the right technologies in place to support this as well. So it is a key requirement, but it needs to come after we analyze and evaluate what do we have today, what can we use today, and what are the gaps, what's missing, and how do we move forward faster, and what technologies we need to bring in. So hopefully that answered the question.
Okay, great. Don from DTE had to leave early, unfortunately. Otherwise, he would be here to answer some of these questions. So regrets from Don, but we've still got Jamie and Keith. Did Keith want to chime in on this question?
So yeah, I think depending on how large your project is really determines what technologies that you want to pursue. Obviously, you need to have the right personnel to get the right information into the technology and the systems in order to make it effective. It's like all technology, garbage in, garbage out. So you have to tailor your technology and your systems to the size of the project. There's not a one size fits all. Some of the products are expensive and they make sense on large projects, but on small capital projects, maybe a lighter system makes sense to help connect this. And you need to get the right people in there to build the work packages, to measure the progress, and to get the information into the system in order to understand the full benefits.
Excellent. And Jamie, I'm sure
and I'll add one point. I think what we want to do is avoid connecting AWP specifically to a need to have a certain level of information management tool engagement. Like Keith said, depending on the project size, what we have in place, a gap assessment on that may indicate that the tools that are currently in place within an organization are sufficient in terms of getting efficiency and information management. But I think to work in parallel with doing some assessments of where we are as organizations relative to performing AWP, gap assessing our systems, and looking at our areas for improvement. If we're running in parallel, our growing in our understanding of the enabling technology and tools that are in place, that are evolving, we'll do ourselves well to be best prepared to most efficiently enable what AWP brings.
Excellent. Thank you for those thoughtful responses. We'll go with one more quick question before we close off here. From Lloyd, how do you change the culture how would a subcontractor look at changing the culture in a situation where they have fewer resources to support the change? Maybe we'll continue with Jamie's thoughts on that.
Yes, one of the key aspects, I think, for owners and contractors working together to make change most effective would involve engaging in advance, well enough in advance of involvement on a particular project scope to where you can make sure that you are identifying the needs to engage at the subcontractor levels with known subcontractors, with potential subcontractors, so that the entire team who all end up being touched, by the AWP structure, framework, and context, are able to be engaged in enough time up front to mature on the curve. Since there still are a number of representatives in the industry that are progressing in that maturity.
Okay, and Keith, your point of view on this one?
I agree with Jamie. I think the early engagement of the subcontractors is extremely important to getting them on board and helping them change. And I think depending on their scope of work would depend how involved they would be in advanced work packaging. And based on who your general contractor is, I would expect that the general contractor would help at least initially set up those subcontractors for success, supplement their teams, help train them. They do have limited resources, and it would be up to the general contractors on the job sites to help affect that change for the project.
Great. And Fernando?
Yeah, I agree with both Jamie and Keith there. I think it's critical to understand that a lot of these subcontractors probably, it may be the first time they're even exposed to advanced work packaging, work-based planning. So you need to recognize that, because the benefits are really driving up to the EPCs and the owner eventually, right? So, you do need to support them and maybe have people in place that are there, whether they're planning facilitators or not, that help engage them. I also agree that there should be an onboarding process, right? Hey, you're coming into this program. Here's your expectations. The contracts are aligned, and so you probably notice these things. And let me tell you what that means, what we're trying to get. So those are all key parts of bringing a subcontractor on that you really want to make sure is working with the team and not against the grain, right? Because we have packages, they have process that needs to be followed, and making sure that our key subcontractors that will affect that are engaged properly.
Perfect. So any additional questions that we didn't have time to address today, I'll make sure that the panelists receive those, as well as any additional feedback that you may have. We'd like to encourage you to respond to a survey we're going to send out after this webinar. You kind of get some more thoughts on what you'd like to see addressed at the AWP conference on the topic of changing the culture. And our panelists will work to those in their plenary session in October. So thank you very much, everyone, for registering and attending and contributing to a really, as we mentioned, deep conversation that could go on for a very long time, I'm sure. Again, check us out at awpconference.com, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which is August 29th. and we'll send some more information to your inbox around that. So with that, I think I'll just see if there's any final closing comments from our panelists. Keith?
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, Jamie?
I just want to thank everybody for joining on this key topic. You know, in my opinion, AWP brings enjoyment and fun to project management, project delivery, project execution, and I'm glad to have so many who are expressing an interest and are part of this this effort within our industry. So thanks much to all.
Great, and Fernando, closing thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll repeat what you said. I believe culture is something that we don't really think about a lot. And, you know, we tend to focus on process and the technologies and not how do we change our interaction with people, our organization, and the supply chain to make this positive move in AWP. So I think bringing this up, and I appreciate AWP Conference allowing that to bring up this important topic that we need to bring to the forefront and actually address.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks.